With this 4th generation Rio, Kia has produced a smartly styled Super Mini that challenges for class honours and will suit sensibly minded buyers. It's spacious, easy to drive, and in entry-level diesel form, quite astonishingly affordable to run. It is, in short, a very competitive car indeed. For buyers, the Super Mini category has never been more important. Why? Because modern examples of the breed are for the first time large enough to function as complete family transport. Take the car we're looking at here, Kia's 4th generation Rio. It's as big as a turn-of-the-century Astra or Focus from the family hatchback sector, the next pricier class up. And more importantly, it's the first really top-class Super Mini the South Korean maker has ever bought us. It's a progression that anyone familiar with Kia will have been expecting. The first 2 generations of Rio were embarrassing, but the 2005 Mark III model was a car that was very nearly class competitive. When the wraps came off this 4th generation version early in 2011 though, it was clear that it was going to be a bit more than that. Here's a car that targets nothing less than the top of the segment in terms of the things that really matter to Super Mini buyers: styling, running costs and everyday practicality. How close it gets is what we're here to find out. Now, accepted wisdom from supposed industry experts like What Car appears to be that Ford's Fiesta leads the Super Mini sector. And since it isn't the best value, the best equipped, the most practical, or the best packaged car out there, that determination is presumably based on driving experience and handling, the least important small car attribute for typical buyers. With this Rio, Kia has designed their small car, their Super Mini, around the needs of the people who will actually buy it. So it's probably fair to say that in the design phase, on-the-limit handling wasn't exactly top of the priority list. Even so, this still manages to be one of the more interesting Super Minis in the class to drive, which will be a revelation to customers graduating to this car from the previous Rio. But there won't be that many of them, so what do you notice if you come to this car more familiar with a commoner Super Mini? A Vauxhall Corsa, a Peugeot 207, a Skoda Fabia, a Volkswagen Polo, or yes, even a Ford Fiesta. Well, drive this Rio for any length of time on our appalling British roads and you'll probably conclude that it rides better than any of its rivals. Yes, a Fiesta, but only a Fiesta, is more composed around the corners. The Ford is sharper to drive too, though the difference between the two cars wouldn't be as great in this respect if this Kia wasn't saddled with a rather vague electric power steering setup. You get the benefit of this around town though, where it facilitates a tight 10.5 metre turning circle. Out on the open road, there's more good news. I'm pretty sure that there isn't a more refined contender in this class, which makes this Kia an excellent motorway performer. Gone are the days when you couldn't consider taking a Super Mini on a very long journey. And this one will be a more relaxing companion than most. The 6-speed manual gearbox is also very slick and the brakes are very good too. All of which will be of more importance to potential buyers than outright speed, which is just as well, for the Rio lineup doesn't offer very much of that. The 107 brake horsepower petrol 1.4 that I'm driving here looks reasonably pokey on paper, capable of rest 60 in 11.1 seconds on the way to 114 miles an hour, as long as you don't saddle it with the optional 4-speed automatic gearbox. But in practice, it needs almost as much coaxing along as the entry-level 83 brake horsepower 1.25 litre petrol-powered model, with plenty of gear changes needed for rapid overtaking or on sharp inclines. Predictably better in this respect are the two CRDI diesels. The frugal 1.1 litre unit has an interesting 3-cylinder arrangement that gives it a distinctive but not unpleasant thrum. And though on paper, with only 74 brake horsepower, rest of 60 in 15 seconds and a top speed of under 100 miles an hour, it sounds as if it might be a bit gutless. In practice, thanks to a useful 170 Newton meters of torque, you can actually bowl along quite nicely without the need to stir the gearbox too much. If you really do find it a bit feeble, then there's always the option of the 89 brake horsepower 1.4 litre CR-Di Rio, which gets to 60 2.5 seconds quicker and has much more mid-range pulling power thanks to its 220 Newton meters of torque. So different is this Rio from anything Kia has offered in the Super Mini segment before that the Korean maker should really have given it a different name. Come to this car expecting lowest common denominator motoring and you're going to be in for a rather pleasant shock. Ex-Audi stylist Peter Schreier has penned a shape that's lower, longer and wider than before, with a forward slanting wedgy look and a pronounced coupe-like roofline. Now for the first time there's also the option of a 3-door body style, but it's this 5-door that will continue to account for 3/4 of all UK sales. The overall look isn't perhaps quite as distinctive as the brand likes to believe, but it's certainly very neat, with a new interpretation of the Kia family tiger-nosed front grille that integrates nicely with these front headlamp units. There's a distinctive feature line along the flanks, flowing into a high-shouldered rear end with a sharp rear screen angle. Now that rear end could have been a bit better thought out, as sat here in the driver's seat it's not that easy to see out the back, which is a pity because parking sensors are only standard on the plushless version. That apart though, there's precious little to criticise in here, unless you've an aversion to black plastic. But even if that's the case, you'd have to concede that the standard of material quality in here is actually very good for an affordable Super Mini, even if it can't quite match the standard set by the class best. It's a huge improvement on what went before though. Signature features like this so-called 3-cylinder instrument cluster, mixing with new ideas like these toggle switches on the centre console. And there are nice design touches as well. A moulded insert point down here just in front of the gear stick to stop your mobile phone from moving around. And not one, but two 12-volt socket points, flanking jack points for iPods and USB sticks. And thanks to reach and rake adjustability for the steering on most models and a height adjustable driver's seat, it should be possible for just about anyone to get comfortable at the wheel. And it's a more spacious place to be than anything the old Rio could offer. This car is, after all, at just over 4 metres in length, 55mm longer than a Fiesta, well, nearly as big as a Focus, and it's 25mm wider in the cabin than the car it replaced. Now the combination of this and the way that the windscreen has been pushed forwards and upwards to provide more headroom makes this car feel as big inside as something from the Astra or Focus size family hatchback segment in the next class up. Well, until a few years ago anyway. Now, I'd wondered if the coupe-like roofline would make things feel a little claustrophobic back here, but a 70mm increase in wheelbase has released 34mm more rear legroom. So a couple of adults will be quite comfortable here, even on longer journeys. 3 might be a bit of a squash, perhaps, but a trio of kids will be quite happy in the back here. So I expect you're getting my point. Here's a car that most who buy something larger in the next Focus or Astra size class up would be quite happy with, except perhaps when it comes to boot capacity. Now, to be fair, the 288 litres on offer here is a 7% improvement on this model's predecessor, thanks to a 100mm increase in width. But it's still 20% less than you get in a larger family hatchback like a Golf. Still, this is pretty par for the course in the Super Mini segment, and you can extend it by pushing forward the usual 60/40 split folding rear seats, although you don't get a completely flat load bay when you do flatten them forward. There's also plenty of in-cabin storage space with a 15-litre glove box, 3 litres of extra centre console storage space, and bottle holders in the doors that'll hold a 1.5 litre bottle in the front and a 500 millilitre bottle in the rear. Kia's Rio used to be priced at thousands of pounds below obvious Super Mini rivals, but that was when it was a much inferior product. Today, there's not so much in it, though with prices residing in the £10,000 to £15,000 bracket, it's still at the affordable end of the Super Mini spectrum, with equipment levels that improve upon those offered by obvious alternatives. And there are plenty of those. So let's see how this car stacks up. Now, I'd reckon on the most obvious alternative being Škoda's Fabia, a high quality offering like this one from what the market perceives as a value brand. Seems Kia's UK marketeers agree with me, for the two cars are almost identically priced. You'll pay about the same as you would for a Rio if you go for a Peugeot 207 or a Ford Fiesta as well, unless you choose the Ford in 1.4 litre petrol form, where it's about £1,000 less but offers significantly less power. A Vauxhall Corsa, though, is pricier. If you go for a 1.4 litre petrol version or a 95 PS 1.3 litre CDTI diesel, you'll be looking at paying around £500 more than you would for a comparable Rio. And the difference rises to almost £2,000 if you're comparing like-for-like bottom-of-the-range petrol and diesel models. But if you really want to make this Kia look good value, then compare it to a Volkswagen Polo. Now, in 1.4 litre petrol form, as I've been driving here, we'll compare that to the equivalent Volkswagen Polo, or compare any Rio diesel to the Volkswagen, and you're looking at a difference of around £2,500 to get yourself in the German car. Now, whichever 3 or 5 door Rio model you decide upon, 1.1 or 1.4 litre diesel, 1.25 or the 1.4 litre petrol unit that I've got here, you should find your car to be decently equipped, because all models get daytime running lights, speed variable wipers, a height adjustable driver's seat, front electric windows, a trip computer, a 12-volt power socket. Actually, you get 2 of those. You can also expect to find a decent quality MP3 compatible CD stereo with steering wheel controls and USB and AUX ports. And only very basic models do without things like Bluetooth phone compatibility and air conditioning. More importantly, Kia doesn't equate safety provision to the amount that customers have paid for their cars. So all models get exactly the same high standard of safety spec, including ESC stability control fitted across the range. When you slam on your ABS brakes, you get emergency brake assist to maximise their effectiveness, and you get emergency stop signalling, which automatically activates the hazard warning flashes to warn following motorists. Now, if all of that should fail to help you avoid an accident, there are twin front, side and curtain airbags, anti-whiplash front head restraints and ISOFIX child seat fastenings. It all explains a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating. Now, at launch, this Rio set a new benchmark for low running costs. The entry-level 1.1 litre CR-Di diesel model had an engine more frugal and greener than any other internal combustion engine on the market, including hybrids and other makers' eco specials. It was supposed to be capable of returning an astonishing 88.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and putting out just 85 grams per kilometre of CO2. That's about 10% better than the previously class-leading Volkswagen Polo 1.2 litre TDI Blue Motion that will cost you a whopping £3,500 more. Mind you, order your Rio 1.1 CR-Di with air conditioning, as most customers will, and those figures do take a bit of a hit, down to 78.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 94 grams per kilometre of CO2, but they're still pretty impressive. Go for the larger diesel, the 1.4 litre CR-Di, and you're looking at 70.6 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 105 grams per kilometre of CO2. With all Rio diesel models, these figures are achieved thanks to the company's EcoDynamics technology, which includes low rolling resistance tyres, a gear shift change-up indicator, efficient electric power steering, and a drag-reducing front grille and rear spoiler. Kia has also added a resistance point to the accelerator, which prevents unintentional full throttle usage. And you get the ISG Intelligent Stop and Go system, which cuts the engine when you don't need it, when you're waiting in traffic or stuck at the lights. Petrol-powered Rio customers have to do without all the EcoDynamic stuff, but they shouldn't despair. The petrol 1.4 that I'm driving here manages 51.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle, and it puts out 128 grams per kilometre of CO2, which is very creditable. Go for the entry-level petrol 1.25 litre variant, and you can expect 56.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 114 grams per kilometre of CO2. What else? Residual values, well, they should be far better than those of the old Rio and will be propped up very nicely by an industry-leading warranty package, which is transferable onto subsequent owners. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that the trumpeted 7-year, 100,000 mile cover actually only applies to the engine and gearbox. It's 5 years and 100,000 miles for everything else. But it's still a useful selling point, as is the fixed-priced Care 3 servicing plan, which you can specify for either 3 or 5 years. Insurance groupings on the 1-50 scale are between 3 and 18. It's easy to see why Kia is one of the fastest growing car makers in the world, doubling its global sales over the last few years thanks to a range of models now seriously troubling the European market's established players. Now here's another one that'll add to their concerns. It's class-leadingly spacious and efficient and able to take on its mainstream rivals head-on. In fact, it betters many of them. This then is a car that has come of age. No longer is it a Super Mini you'd recommend merely because of generous equipment levels or a modest upfront asking price. True, there are some cars in this segment that handle more sharply and a few have smarter cabins. None, though, are more spacious or more practical, and very few ride better, which is another of the reasons why this might be considered a clever alternative to a Focus-size family hatchback from the next class up. If you're thinking of buying in this sector, then you probably won't be considering this car as an option. But take it from me, you should be.